Namaste. Welcome to this session. We are considering the topic of Cittaparikarma, and therein the fourth measure by the way of sutra, Vishoka va Jyotishmati. And in the last session we were considering the Vishoka pravrutti and Jyotishmati pravrutti, apart from the pravrittis that we saw earlier in the previous sutra, Vishayavati pravrutti, then Shabda pravrutti, Sparsha pravrutti, Rupa pravrutti, Rasa pravrutti, Gandha pravrutti. They are also called samvit, like Citta samvit, Shabda samvit, Sparsha samvit, Rupa samvit, Rasa samvit, Gandha samvit. And these are the sensory processes to work on celestial experiences. And then we saw the Vishoka pravrutti and Jyotishmati pravrutti, and therein we were looking at Vyasa's commentary, which was describing it. In the Jyotishmati pravrutti and Vishoka pravrutti, Vyasa brings the Asmita samapanna state of Citta. And then he explains the yogi's experience of just being. We don't have the experience of being, but we have something called a state of being. We have states of being. And we don't have pure state of being, the experience of it. And if it is there, it's just as a lightning. But for a yogi, it is a prolonged experience. And there we saw the Hridaya Kamala, reference given to Hridaya Kamala for the Asmita pravrutti. And the yogi's experience of being, where he understands or he experiences that he is like unruffled ocean or the spotless sky. So all these things came in the consideration of the pravrutti, Chidakasha concept. And that's a state when one is beyond any sorrow. So the Jyotishmati and Vishoka pravrutti, they also are mutually related. We saw that there are two sides of the same coin. Primarily, we were discussing with the Asmita matra pravrutti or the Asmita pravrutti while we were concluding the session last time. Now this Asmita has been clarified by Vijnana Bhikshu in his Yoga Vartika. Asmita atra na ahankaraha kintu tmatattvam. Because we know that Asmita is a klesha. Then Asmita is also a samadhi content, samadhi matter. So what is that Asmita? Because Asmita is also a synonym to ahankara. Therefore, Vijnana Bhikshu clarifies Asmita atra na ahankaraha kintu tmatattvam. Because Vyasa's description of it speaks about the very tmatattvam, which is like ruffle-less ocean, waveless, steady ocean, extending almost unlimited up to even horizon for us. And we know that ocean extends beyond the horizon as well. So, the Asmita is not to be taken as ahankar, because in vernacular, it becomes a synonym. We refer to one and the same thing as ahankar and one and the same thing as Asmita. And this is what happens in our empirical plane, a worldly plane. And then Patanjali in one place has considered Asmita as a klesha, and in another reference he has made it locus of samadhi. Asmita is a klesha. In panchaparva klesha avidya aspita ragadvesha binivesha klesha. And then in samadhi vitarkanugata vicharanugata anandanugata asmitanugata samadhi. So Patanjali also has brought this term Asmita in diametrically opposite references. And that's why the student of yoga philosophy should be clear that when the same term is used as an affliction and as a locus of samadhi. So in samadhi, Asmita becomes the very tmatattvam. So that is clarified by Vijnana Bhikshu. So Asmita samvit means he is not sensing one's Asmita. Asmita samvit means Atma samvit. It is Atma sakshatkara, as it is called in mysticism. And Atma sakshatkar or self-realization, self-revelation gives a complete, absolutely complete sense of krutarthata, complete sense of contentment, accomplishment. So Asmita Samvit would mean Atma Sakshatkar, and therefore spiritual summum bonum. But in order to say that that is not the case, Vijnana Bhikshu in his Vartika takes up this matter which is so vital and so important. So this is Atma Sakshatkar only of the nature of Jnana Prasadam. So it is experience on the plane of Jnanam. It is something that we call as knowing. It is self-knowing. It is thereafter that Vairagyam would be coming and Asampragnat Samadhi would be coming. And therefore this clarification must be understood, which Vijnana Bhikshu makes it. Another moot aspect here is that, or very fundamental and very vitally important aspect is that, we saw the Shabda Pravrutti, Rasa Pravrutti, Gandha Pravrutti, etc. So, by such 5 Pravrutti, Shabda, Sparsha, Rupa, Rasa, Gandha, it would give the Citta that steadiness. It would only give the steadiness to Citta when those are 5 Vishayavati Pravrittis which we discussed in the previous sutra. So the mind would be, Citta would be steadied, the mind stuff would be steadied. While in Asmita Samvit, it makes itself the subject matter. The Citta itself becomes an object. It is objectified. And this is quite an intriguing aspect of yoga psychology. So in Jnanam, it's a condition that I know. And by Shabdadi, 5 pravrittis, the knowledge would be faultless, knowledge will be immaculate. But in Asmita Samvit, the knower itself is known. And this is the mysticism that must be identified by the student of Yoga Sutra and Yoga Darshanam. It is objectification of the subjective entity. Now, this statement is something that it will let your brain spin. So, it is a unique aspect in antarmukhi in yoga. And this antarmukhi is only for chitta prasadanam and not beyond. So it should not be mistaken that there is that self-realization by Asmita Samvit or what has been mentioned so far. It is only chitta prasadanam. It will only give blessed state of mind whereby it will be able to get into samadhi and then get realizations and revelations and discernments or sakshatkar. So one is prone to make a mistake here, thinking that this Asmita Samvit that has been mentioned here is the same as is Asmita Samadhi. No, it is not that, because this is only means of Chitta Prasadanam, so that the Chitta would be qualified and empowered to go into Samadhi, and it would be thereafter that there would be Asmita Anugata Samadhi. So Asmita Samvit should not be mistaken to Asmita Samadhi. This is important clarification that Vijnan Bhikshu has offered, and that's absolutely important. So it should not be considered mistaken as Atma Sakshatkar. Because the consequence of Asmita Samadhi and consequence of Asmita Samvit will be different. The consequence of Asmita Samadhi would be something that Upanishads mention, Tarati Shokam Atmavit. There is a mention in Upanishads, Tarati Shokam Atmavit. One who has self-realization will have crossed the mire of sorrow, mire of shokam. So that is the consequence of samadhi. That is not the consequence here. The consequence here is that the mind is placid, the mind is, chitta is quietened, the chitta is prasadita. Chitta prasadanam or chitta is a blessed entity. There is a blessedness in the chitta by what is mentioned by Asmita Samvit. And this should not be mistaken to Asmita Samadhi. Because one will not have crossed the sorrow. It is a temporary condition of the mind that it becomes qualified for yogi to go into samadhi, or it is something that bestows us a temporary state of sorrowlessness. And then again, we are back to square one. When we are again engulfed by worldliness, we are again back to square one. So this clarification has been offered that is only Chitta Prasadanam, is only means of Chitta Prasadanam. And to only that extent there is Shoka Taranam. So it is a partial enfranchisement from Shokam. Then it will be also relevant to consider here when the same Asmita gets a mention in kleshas, the Panchataya kleshas, which would be the topic in the second chapter, Sadhana Padam. That Asmita is a delimitation, and actually it is source of all sorrows. All our sorrows, mundane sorrows, worldly sorrows, they all stem from Asmita. And that is Asmita Klesha. So all the vasanas, when they actualize, get accentuated, functional, they all stem from Asmita Klesha. So Asmita Klesha is jungle of karma vasanas. It is afforestation of karma vasanas. And it can also afforestate. It can create the afforestation, and it is by itself afforestation of vasanas, the subconscious tendencies. But in samadhi, it is a principle. It becomes a metaphysical principle. And then it is nirupadhika tattvam. Nirupadhika. That means it has no delimitations. So at this point, I should tell you that Asmita is a concept, technical term in yoga, where we should not have any confusion, because Asmita is a klesha as well, and Asmita is a samvit as well. Asmita is for chitta prasadanam when it is Asmita samvit. But the Asmita is the whole hub of all problems when it is Asmita klesha. And therefore, the student of yoga philosophy should be clear about this. So Asmita tattvam is nirupadhikam. Nirupadhika means it doesn't have delimitations. Upadhis are such as caste, class, creed, race, ethnicity, gender, age, state, condition, etc., etc. So that pure state of being is free from such delimitations, and that's why it gives a transcendent state. We are not under the gravities. That is called nirupadhikata in yoga psychology. So Asmita samvit generates that nirupadhika state, undelimited state. Now let's try to understand this with a very practical example. When our I, the sense of I, is in a wakeful state, then we are afflicted by tapatrayas. We are afflicted by trividha tapas, adibhotik, adidaivik, adhyatmik. And then it is parched. It is parched by this tapatraya. And then all the vikaras, the vikrutis, play havoc. And then there is that commotion of all our vikrutis. Because that becomes a stage for all that commotion. And you can see that there is all upadhis are starkly visible, and they have a stark presence in our mind. So these delimitations, as I've been telling you, class, caste, creed, race, gender, status, beliefs, isms, etc., etc. So also status, stature, etc. So also circumstances, paristhiti, antasthiti. So all these are extending gravities to our subjective entity. And when it is not, when they are removed by having taken the proper measures that yoga mentions, which is the Cittaparikarma, then in that Asmita, the yogi's mind is engaged, and then it is like ocean, nistaranga mohodadhivat, and it is shanta ananta, as we saw in Vyasa's commentary. And that experience, that subjective experience that yogi gets, gives him the revelation that I am like this. Nirupadhika, nirvikara, ananta. So yogi gets that realization, a glimpse of realization, and of course, as I just now told you, it is different than samadhi experience. And therefore, the yogis and these mystics have understood that Atma is Aja, that is unborn. Atma is Amara, Atma is deathless. Atma is Amrutyu, that it doesn't have death. So Amrutatvam, Ajaratvam, Avyaktatvam, Achintyam, Niranjanam, Nirvikaram. So these are the attributes of Atma, which the Upanishads have been describing, and which we will never experience. We never experience that we are birthless and deathless people. We know that we had a birth, and we know that we are having a death. And then we know that we are going to have jara, means decay. And then we'll have diseases, we'll have problems, we are limited, we are spatialized. But the fact is, metaphysically, we are told that all that is not to us. It is all to our sheaths, external sheaths over the Atma. And then, with reference to the technology of yoga, one thing needs to be told here, that exhalation, the exhalative pranayam, exhalative shvasayam, the rechika pranayam gives a kind of pratiprasava to our existence. And we go closer to our very core of existence, in the atmosphere of core of existence. And exhalation is kind of a quick solution for overcoming one's sorrows and overcoming the delimitations temporarily. So it is exhalation which takes us closer to tmatattvam. And you can watch the exhalative process of devolution. We devolve from gross and manifest towards nominal and unmanifest. And then our terminus is that Asmita, the atmosphere of Asmita. And there we experience Vishoka avastha. So exhalation is a process to not only have distension and relaxation, as it is known in popular yoga, but it is to take us closer to sorrowlessness. It takes us in the zone of sorrowlessness. And also it takes us in the zone of Jyotishmati pravrutti, the inner luminosity. And all this immersion of body, mind, senses, psyche, consciousness, the immersion takes place in Hridaya Kamalam, according to mysticism of yoga and in technology of yoga. And there the Citta becomes Nistaranga Mohodadhi Kalpam, etc., as described by Vyasa in his commentary. And then it becomes like even crystal, immaculate crystal, Abhijata Mani, transparent crystal. Then also it has a luminosity, just as we have experience of luminosity of sun and moon and jewels, diamonds, etc. They have luminosity. Similarly, there is a subjectivistic luminosity, and that has been referred to as Jyotishmati pravrutti in a subjectivistic state. And that is the platform or plane on which Atma Sakshatkar would be taking place as and when it might take place. And that is a unique state that you are bereft of raga, dvesha, lobha, moha. You are bereft of any kama, any desire, kama, krodha, lobha, moha, bada, matsarya. All these shadripus, they are in a budded state. While in a wakeful state, they are bloomed and blossomed. But with exhalations and in a yogic state, and for us, merely exhalative process will diminish the shadripus. And our knowledge doesn't have any refraction in such a state of mind or chitta. Otherwise, our jnana is also always refracted. It is because of all these vasanas and shadripus, etc., engulfing the mind or becoming almost material of the mind. Then there is a lot of refraction in our experiences, in our knowledge. So therefore, there is always artha viparyasam in jagrata avastha. We will never get pure knowledge, complete knowledge, faultless knowledge in an awakeful state of consciousness, because there is invariably that refraction, and therefore it would be artha viparyasam. There is always viparyasa, there is always illusion in our knowledge. We will never get perfect and complete and faultless knowledge in a wakeful state of consciousness. It needs the fourth state of consciousness. Then only there are the chitta is free from contortions and distortions. So this is also a factor to be understood. We are all waiting to get perfect and complete and faultless knowledge in our awakeful state, and this is really impossible. And yoga, the philosophy of yoga, psychology of yoga tells us about this. Invariably the refraction in our experiences. Our experiences are never pure, which come in a wakeful state, which come to the I, the pronoun I. Because the pronoun I itself is contorted and distorted. So, the Asmita samvit is also a condition for pure and faultless knowledge. So that is what also we have to understand here. And therefore, if you have to have the pure knowledge and faultless and complete knowledge, immaculate knowledge, you should recall that precept of Bhagavad Gita, or even many smritis. Satvat sanjayate jnanam. Satvat, the sattvikata. And sattvikata will only help you overcome the distortions and contortions. It will be minimized in a wakeful state. And then you leap into the fourth state of consciousness called turiyavastha. And there you can get faultless knowledge, faultless experience. Otherwise, we never have faultless experiences in true sense of the term. Anyway, in this fourth kind of Cittaparikarma measure, we considered the sutra, which is Vishoka va Jyotishmati. Then Patanjali mentions the fifth Chitta Karmopaya, which is by way of a sutra called Vitaraga Vishayam va Chittam. Vitaraga Vishayam va Chittam. So here The Chitta is made, given or endowed with a blessed state by a measure which is mentioned in this sutra. The Chitta should take support of Vitaragam. Vitaraga means Vigata Raga. Raga means Rajoguna. Raga means attachment. The freelancing of Rajoguna. Freelancing of likes, desires, etc. So when the desires and likes are given free platform for them to carry out their dance, that is Ragavastha. And when there is discouragement to that, or when there is absence of that, the desires and likes, etc., are not bubbling and boiling, then that is called Vitaraga state. So the Chitta should take support of Vitaraga. So that is what the sutra is mentioning. The Chitta should take support, because we are in a wakeful state. When we are going for Cittaparikarma, we are in a wakeful state. So what will we do in a wakeful state? Is that first it should be Vigata Rajoguna. Because the Rajoguna means the freelancing of desires, likes, aspirations. So the Chitta should be given support of something that is Vitaraga Vishayam. Vitaraga Vishayam means the mind, the Chitta of Sadhu, mind and Chitta of saints. Their minds, we take support of their lives and their biographies. But we do not have this idea of taking support of their mind itself. Their mind is balanced, their mind is in equilibrium, their mind is without any defects and taints and afflictions. Their minds are desireless. The minds are passionless. They are personified dispassions. So, what is suggested is take support of their mind. We become noble by thinking of the saintly, noble mystics like Ramana Maharshi, Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. When we read their lives, we are touched by their lives, and then we are given a transcendent state. So we take support of their life stories, by their Jivana Leela. And that is all we know. And that's how we get touched by their pure Chitta, and temporarily our Chitta also becomes pure. But here Patanjali is suggesting, let us try to imagine their very mind. How might be the mind of Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa? How must be the very mind of Ramana Maharshi? How must be the very mind of Sri Gnaneshwara, Sri Tukaram, Ramdas Maharaj, Ramdas Swami? How must be their mind? We should have this imagination to really crystallize their mind, give a configuration to their minds, and if we take support to their minds, we will have much more nobler effects than what happens by hearing to their gospels, listening to their gospels, or reading their biographies. That certainly ennobles our mind. So their life ennobles our mind, but we never think of objectifying their own mind, by which they are saints and sages and noble people. So our Chitta should make the Vitaraga as a Vishaya, the very Vitaraga as a support. So the Chitta of saints, sages, yogis, jnanis, bhaktas, we must make their Chitta as support of our Chitta. Our chitta should take support of their chitta. That will have quantum leap in giving us a sublime state. And then we also start becoming greatly vitaraga. The raga within us goes away at a greater pace and to a greater quantity. And then our mind becomes shanta, prasanna, udatta, pavitra, pavana. So our mind also becomes quiet, placid. Our mind becomes blessed. Our mind becomes magnanimous. Our mind becomes pious, sanctified, pure. And that is why we are told about satsanga, sadhu sanga, santa sanga, which will very greatly work on our mind being made purer and purer and purer. So, this is what Vitaraga Vishayam Va Chittam Sutra is suggesting. I recall Vachaspati Mishra clarifying what I just now told you. Vitaragaha Krishna Dvaipayana Prabhutayaha Tesham Chittam Tadeva Alambanam Tena Uparoktam Iti. Krishna Dvaipayanadi means Vyasa, the great sage Vyasa, etc. Vyasadi Prabhuti. Their chitta, we should take support of their chitta itself, not their support. Of course, our mind becomes sublime by taking support to Vyasa, taking support of Jnaneshwar, Tukaram, Ramana Maharshi, Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. But what is being suggested is taking support of Tesham Chittam, Tadeva Alambanam. That itself support, the Chittam itself support. Their Chitta itself support. Their Chitta is pure, pious, transparent, dentless, spotless. So, it is taking support of Ragarahita Chittam. And therefore, our Chitta would also become prasadita quite exponentially. So that is what is being suggested. Vijnana Bhikshu has also similar commentary saying that Sanakadi, if Vachaspati says Vyasadi, he says Sanakadi. Sanak, Sanandan, Sanat Srujat, Sanat Kumar. They were exalted beings and they were known for their Vairagyam. Their Vairagya had reached par excellence, and taking support of their Chitta is what is being suggested here. Then our Chitta also would become exponentially sublime, quiet, serene, and that would help our mind to become steady so that the mind can be engrossed in ekatattva or samadhyavalambanam or dhyanavalambanam. That is a touchstone effect to our Chitta. Taking support of their Chitta is an unusual kind of advice that comes in Patanjali's text. Otherwise, usually we are told, think of noble people, their noble life, their Leelamruta, Jivana Leelamruta, their life was on a totally transcendent plane. They were not mortals in their life, they in their behavior and their conduct. Nowhere the meanness and mortality came in. The magnanimity and the immortality could be seen in their very conduct of life. So we are told about that. But here Patanjali mentions taking support of their Chitta itself, whereby they become what they are or what they were. So that is exalted Daivi Sangha, because they are personification of Daivi Gunas. And therefore, Pavityam, Mangalyam, or Daivatvam, our Chitta would become also, it would be divinized. So, that is what this Vitaraga Vishayam Vachittam is mentioning. So, that is the fifth Chitta Parikarma Upaya. Now we are going to very interesting Chitta Parikarma Upaya, which is the sixth means Swapnanidrag Jnanalambanam Va. It is very fascinating and it is quite extensive. So therefore we will be considering that in our next session. So enough for the time being. Namaskar all of you.